Hi, my name's Mark Berridge, speaker and author. It's my privilege to have been on the online prosperity show today, where we spoke about adversity and how, even in our toughest moments, just finding the perspective to do the smallest actions can drive us forward and help us realize that we're a fraction stronger than we think.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga, and today I've got a guest whose story will make you question the limits you set for yourself. Now, Mark, how are you doing today?
I'm doing absolutely fantastic. Thanks, Prosper. Thanks, listeners.
Absolutely. Well, the pleasure is all mine. Mark, I've been watching your TED Talks, reading all your books and everything else that comes along with it. Now, I'm actually shaking with because I'm in front of royalty right now. So I really appreciate you for taking us on and being a guest on the show today.
Oh, that's absolutely lovely. And I'm glad it's not shaking with fear. That's not typically the emotion I'm going for. So shaking with excitement.
Absolutely. Oh, no, it is all excitement from this end. But for those that are wondering why I'm fanboying with Mark, he's an award-winning author, TEDx speaker, and a man who's actually turned a life-changing spinal injury into a story of resilience and a growth. Now, Mark is not just about bouncing back, he's about bouncing back stronger. And trust me, you'll want to hear how he's helping people and businesses embrace all the uncertainty that happens in life while turning adversity into your own secret weapon. Now, Mark, obviously, I think I went above and beyond, and I did come across some stuff. I don't know if you want us to tell people what happened at the Thai airport.
Oh yeah, sorry, the Thai airport. Well, that's a story that doesn't often come out. It comes back to when I was just 21, and I was going for really my first major international trip. So I grew up in country WA. My parents, we didn't have overseas holidays, and I got selected on this hockey tour for University of Western Australia Hockey Club. I was so excited. You know, like I packed my bags 2 weeks before. I'd been just so excited about this for so long, and my housemates were taking the mickey out of me for packing my bags early, etc., etc. Anyway, take off. We get to Thailand airport, and Bangkok's just so hot, so humid, and I'm just like not prepared for this. And we've been told to dress up in our official tour uniform, which is built for Europe, and I'm just sweating like nothing else as we charge through Bangkok airport because we're late for our connecting flight, and I'm really panicked I'm going to lose the guys. I'm thinking how they're navigating us around this airport so quickly, and I'm just a bit on edge, right, from this whole experience. First trip overseas, sweating, jogging through this airport, and then we finally get to the security, and all our matching hockey bags are going through the security screening in Bangkok airport. So this is just a couple of years ago, because I'm over 50 now. So 1990 October 1993, and suddenly the alarms go off on all our bags, all our matching bags, and I think, well, that's weird. I wonder whose bag it is. Well, we went through Perth security. They did a really good job, but couldn't be any of our bags. No, it does look like one of our bags. Oh, maybe it's Rue, my mate. He's come from Melbourne. They couldn't have done such a good job in Victoria as they do in WA. And so I'm trying to reassure myself, right? Reassure myself it's not my bag. And then I realise it's my bag, and they're pointing and saying, is this your bag? And I'm going, oh, yeah, that's my bag. And I'm pretty worried. I get even more worried when this like huddle of people comes up around my bag and around me as I sheepishly walk to this bag. And literally at that point, because I didn't know much about Thailand at all, being, growing up country WA, etc., I don't know. And all I could think about was Nicole Kidman getting arrested for drugs planted in her bag in a television show called The Bangkok Hilton. I had this sort of show coming up in my mind all of a sudden. All I could think of this is my holiday is ruined, this dream trip. Anyway, they point at the end of the bag, and I start to relax again. I go, oh, my God, they've got it wrong. That's just going to be my cassette tapes, for those that are my vintage that remember cassette tapes, and my hockey whistles, they've somehow got them mistaken, and that's what it is. So I start bravely pulling out cassette tapes and hockey whistles, and then one of their hands reaches into the end of my bag and pulls out a set of handcuffs. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going to get detained here. We're running late for this plane anyway. Like, you know, the plane's boarding. I am not going to get on this plane. I'll be lucky. I don't know how I'm going to catch up with the boys, if at all, or I'm going to get sent home in embarrassment. How terrible is this? Like, so I'm just shrinking into the spot, and I'm sweating from the whole trip around the airport so quickly and the humidity. And I am absolutely in a panic. But they then, quite hilariously, decided that they were going to bubble wrap up these handcuffs, and they were pulled out at the end and put it into what they called secure luggage, and they gave me this slip to say that they were going on the plane with us as secure luggage. And yeah, it was my bloody housemates that had set me up from Perth that had just decided to put stuff in my bag, and they put chili and stuff. I did all sorts of things through my bags just to, I guess, pay me back for being so excited about this trip amongst our house for so long. And I just walked on that plane, and I'm just like so embarrassed. I'm so shocked. All those things. And I think there's a lesson in it, right? Even though it's sort of a really funny event to look back on, things are quite often never as bad in the moment as you expect they are. And in that moment, you know, multiple times through that whole funny moment, you know, situation, I really thought, this is terrible. Like, my whole dream holiday stuff that I've been saving up for, that I want to play on this hockey tour through, you know, Europe, suddenly been taken away from me just from what happened to be the actions of my housemates. And can you imagine it today? You just couldn't do that to someone today. But yeah, it was just a weird, funny situation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking us on that journey, because now it validates the whole question. Because I've always wondered, when you get to the airport, they ask you, did you pack these bags yourself? And I'm like, wait a minute. So do you think somebody would have put it all in or packed it for me? So you're the one that triggers that question.
Yeah, people like me, people like my housemates, actually, Prosper. And like, I had packed it all, and I'd packed it all a couple of weeks before, and then I actually repacked it. And the other part of the story is, at the bottom of my hand luggage, I actually found a massive, like, carving knife, like a 12-inch carving knife. So I'd found that, and I thought that was the end of it, right? But somehow, in another part of the bag, they had hidden these handcuffs, and through my underwear they'd put chili, and through my mates. Aren't mates fantastic? And I'm still friends with those two larrikins today.
Absolutely. But obviously, you know, that happens to a whole lot of us, and now it's a good story to tell, you know, but obviously when you're going through that, it's very obviously a panic inducing moment, because those guys don't mess around at the airport. They just completely start treating you like a second-rate citizen or things of that nature. Did you end up winning the hockey matches then when you went to Thailand?
So the hockey matches were in Germany mainly. So we had played 17 hockey games over 21 days, going around Germany, a little bit in Netherlands, and some in France. And yeah, we went brilliantly, and lots of great stories. And it was really one of those life-forming trips. As I said, I hadn't really been overseas before. I'd had one family trip to New Zealand when I was 10 for a couple of weeks, and then this, and just the opportunity to be in the world and you know, play against these other teams, and the bond that we formed with those other hockey players is just incredible. And the photos, and such great memories, and the handcuffs did come all the way around the tour with us. So it just became one of those funny little moments for the rest of the tour. If you were trying to chat up a girl in the pub or something, then the guys would sneak up behind you if you weren't paying attention. Next thing you know, you're handcuffed to the bar, or you're handcuffed to the chair, or something, that the stool that you were leaning on, or something. You know, if there was a way to handcuff you to something while you were just not aware of it, because you're so focused on, you know, on your beer or the chat that you were involved with, then next thing you know, you could be in trouble. So yeah, it just became one of those fun memories. I ended up writing a diary about that whole trip, which, you know, we're still really strong friends together, all of us that went on that tour. We had our 30-year reunion last year. I flew over to Perth for it. And the diary, I think, is really famous amongst us for that, capturing the memories of it. And I do wonder if I never would have written that diary if that massive event at Thailand airport, Bangkok airport on the way out hadn't happened. Like, was that the trigger for me to go, you know what, I am going to write a diary about this trip, about this event and the experience. Maybe I had the idea already, but I think that event might have, solidified that desire to sort of record the event. So I'm not sure. It sounds weird. I'm sure in the moment there was no solidification of wanting to record it, but once we sort of got through that, and it became a sort of an event of fun, because even just we were connecting in Heathrow back to Munich, and we had to work out how we're going to get the handcuffs down on our next flight because we don't know where they are. And it became like this laugh, and then hugely embarrassing for me as a 21-year-old bloke to be going, by the way, they took my handcuffs off me at the Bangkok airport. We want them now. I didn't want them then, but now I do want them. I couldn't have cared at that point in time. All I wanted to do was get on the plane, and they could have been incinerated in Bangkok for all I care, right? But once I got on the plane, it became a task, 14 hours of recovery later on the plane with the friends and getting over the event. You start to say, well, actually, where's the fun in this? Yeah.
Absolutely. From what I'm gathering is, no matter what is happening to you, obviously be cognizant and pay attention, because not only will you have a good story to tell on one day, but also, you would need to know the meaning that you're going to be attributing to that particular event. It might just lead to things later on in life. So obviously you guys grew up and you started on with your lives, and you engaged in the workforce. And tell us a little bit about obviously your corporate life and how you got started in this path.
Yeah, so at that stage I was already working for a big mining company called Rio Tinto. I'd a couple of years out of university, or a year and a half. I'd joined them after doing a business degree, and it was just the perfect first job for me because I cost 30,000 Aussie dollars per year, and I was running these ships that cost 30,000 US dollars per day. So I'm just going, all I got to do is save a day, and I've saved more than my annual salary. Eventually someone's going to notice that. And, that became my sort of, I guess, it just gave me that really, that commercial trade-off, which I think was really important to me, finding my identity in that, the things that I was passionate about in a work sense. So, yeah, that started me on a journey of doing, working through shipping and logistics, sales and marketing, business improvement, and most, I guess, the highest profile roles around negotiation, mainly for Rio Tinto, but also for some other companies. And then I'd started consulting into that field at the point in time where I crashed a bicycle pretty severely.
I mean, obviously, that's where your story actually starts, with that cycling accident that then led you from the corporate life to starting on a journey to inspiring others through speaking and writing. Tell us a little bit about that incident.
Yeah, I'd say that everything in your life sort of builds up to the way you handle the incident. So it's not, not a discrete start per se, but yeah, the step change of the current trajectory of my story coming out of that event. And so I was typically cycling 250 Ks a week with my friends for fitness. That's my main sort of headspace and physical fitness. And halfway through a typical Sunday 70-kilometre ride, my bicycle front wheel just hit a sunken piece of road and suddenly lost traction. So I'm a little imbalanced on the bike all of a sudden. And then I'm fighting to regain control, control. I've got to think about what are my options here. I look straight ahead, see a grassy park. I can see around, as I look around my natural line of looking into the corner, I can see a really steep, big curb in front of me. And I think, if I try and force the corner now, and I don't think I can make it, but if I try to force it, I'm going to hit that really big curb, and that's going to be a really dangerous, uncontrolled accident. I'm going straight for the grassy park straight ahead. So it's amazing how quickly your brain sort of processes a lot of information when you're in a survival mode. And so grassy park straight ahead, that's going to save me. But I knew I was going over the handlebars and knew it was going to hurt. Unfortunately, the way it played out, I ended up flying really high off the bike. So I smashed into the pine barriers at the edge of the park, flew high, took on a bit of a Superman pose as I went, just the way I sort of got wrenched off the handlebars and off the cleats of the bike, and then came pile driving down into the ground. But unfortunately, I found a stormwater drain that was 5 foot below ground level. So not only have I sort of flown really high, but then I've come down, deeper into the ground than I would have, rather than, sort of a more natural roll through the part that might have been possible with a different trajectory and with a different landing point. So all of that force, went through my wrist, first of all, crushing and fracturing the left wrist. So they say eventually that'll need to be fixated, sort of fused to no movement. Then helmet significantly damaged. Thankfully did a really, really great job of protecting my head. Left shoulder, scapula was fractured, 3 ribs fractured. And so I was in extraordinary pain in the ditch. And what I didn't realise is the main cause of that pain was 2 fractured vertebrae. So only once we got to hospital a few hours later and I got the results of the scans did I hear that one of my vertebrae was crushed to 40% of its original height. So if you think it's, typically an ice cube type size, if you can imagine an old-fashioned sugar cube, one of those, basically a sugar cube of my vertebrae got fractured off and burst into the spinal cord, and only sort of 20%ish of my spinal cord was left undamaged by that piece of fracture going into the spinal cord. So it's no wonder that when I was in the ditch, I was in some pretty intense pain. I really didn't know what was going on. I was just trying to control my breathing, control the moment. And I always think it's interesting that I don't recall ever trying to move when I was in the ditch. And I don't know if it was because I couldn't move, but I think more likely it's because your body's just so smart that it went into protection mode and it knew it had to protect my spine from no movement and no more damage. And so I just basically, was in the safety position and I just stayed in that position. I just tried to work on not panicking and how do I control my breathing. And I know that I didn't expect to hear spinal cord injury when I got to hospital, because at some point in that time in the ditch, and it might have been the paramedics, they asked me to wiggle my toes, and I thought I could wiggle my toes. So I thought I had, movement in those extremities. So I was, extraordinarily shocked when we got to hospital and heard about the spinal cord injury. Not quite as shocked as my wife, who normally is completely unfazed about anything, and a lawyer, incredibly talented leader, amazing lady. And she doesn't really recall very much of that initial briefing because she was so busy trying not to faint and to push herself into the wall and sliding around the corner to find the only chair that she could see. So that sort of gives some idea of the, gravity of the situation. And no doubt I personally was in, shock for, days, weeks afterwards to different degrees. But those first few hours I was in some pretty intense shock.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for going there with us once again. Now, you did emphasize the need to breathe and things of that nature. Is that something that that came naturally to you, or is that from having an understanding that in case things are happening, just breathe to start off with?
Well, obviously we all know it's a helpful thing to do. I think from, having been in high pressure situations and had some anxiety issues at different stages in work in really high pressure situations, you start to realize the impact that not breathing properly has on you. So I definitely had been through the early 2000s. So the accident was March 2019. So the early to mid 2000s, I'd probably been through some, minor anxiety management strategies, CBT theory and some other, skills that I could rely on over the course of my recovery. But I think in that moment, it was more just knowing that I was just so surprised when I first was in the ditch how little I could breathe. And obviously, when you start to hear your injuries, you think, well, that was probably to do with the 3 fractured ribs, which, I know from past experience constrains your breathing. But actually was also due to the 2 crushed vertebrae in my spine, where the body had also frozen up around the bottom part of my lungs. So if you sort of take the bottom part of your rib cage and slide them around to your back, that's the part of the back that I crushed. And so the very bottom of my lungs were impacted from their ability to breathe by that injury, and probably the top half of my lungs were impacted from the 3 fractures. So it was all that impact. And then I've just got this, immediately as I'm sort of in the ditch, the first thing is I'm feeling like I'm getting overwhelmed and panicked, and I know that I can't, like these short little shallow breaths, and I don't know why. So it just gave me something to focus on. I think it helped me take my mind off the pain by going, like, let's just slow the breathing down as much as we can. Let's just get that. I know it hurts, but let's just get it a little bit longer and a little bit deeper and a little bit slower. And I guess it's that first phase of just trying to reverse the trend. At that stage, the trend was all bad. I'd had this massive crash. My body's in panic, and it had the possibility of getting worse if I let the breathing continue short and shallow and panicked. And I think my first strategy was, how do I sort of almost, the one thing I can take control of in this particular situation is just slowing that breathing and not letting this moment of panic get worse. So I'd say that was the main, I think it's instinctive. Yes, I'd say there's some history that I had, but I think it's instinctive. I think most of us would do that.
Absolutely. The reason why I'm asking that is, if that is available to everyone, just in case you get involved in something, or it could be a confrontation with a person or just some anomaly where you could actually just stop and at least start exercising that breathing, because it then calms you down, and then you then get an assessment of the actual situation. Now, obviously, they would have taken you to the hospital, and it's just, fortunate that obviously the system in Australia would have been helpful at that particular moment. But they were telling you at the hospital that you would never walk again. Now, how did you then find strength to just keep moving forward while being faced with such uncertainty?
Yeah, so it was a pretty stark situation that first day when you hear the news about the significant compression of my spinal cord, and they say, without this, an operation as soon as possible, but has to be within 24 hours to put two 23-centimetre rods down my back to support my spine. There's no hope of walking again. And even if that operation is successful, we're not providing any guarantees of your recovery, because we can see that the injury is so significant. And you should prepare yourself for a life of, very limited mobility, was really. And so I started painting this picture of, because I was feeling so woeful about it. And, just sort of, I guess I associate it, and come back to that story about the, Germany hockey tour. I associated so much of my life around being involved in sporting teams, being involved in athletic events, even though, I was never a great athlete, but I was a good team person. I was a good leader in teams. And I always associated so much of my identity around that physical nature, being involved in my kids' sports, running the boundary for them in their sporting, and involved in coaching and umpiring and team management, and, all those things that I saw as being associated with physical Mark suddenly felt like they were, taken away from me. And so I think at the very start, I just, that sense of woe of, can I actually, can I take this on? And I started to paint this picture of, well, you've given me this really unpalatable view of what life might be like. How do I find a way still to be happy about myself in that circumstances? How do I find, like, if I can find a way to get back to being able to drive again, if I can find a way to get back to being able to dress myself, to shower myself, then I'll feel much better about life. How do I aim for that? So I started to paint this picture of this worst case scenario they'd given me, of how I made life okay in my eyes there. Now, I might never reach that, but that's the first view I started to paint. And then I started to paint this view of, well, okay, and they're also being quite vague about my prospects overall. If the operation's successful, they're not, there's basically, the more I ask for certainty about my situation, the less certainty they're giving me. Well, okay, how do I embrace that uncertainty and go, there might actually be good news in there? Like, they're going to talk to me about, like, we all know distribution analysis to a degree, right? People think about shapes of curves. So they'll be talking to me about what they see as the most likely part of that distribution analysis, but that isn't the whole curve. I don't know what the shape of that curve's like. It might be very highly skewed to the situation, that the vision of me that they're painting. But there will also be other parts of that distribution curve that are better. How do I aim for those? So I started to go, I'm going to aim over there. And then I said, but I know I may well not reach that. So how do I still feel good about myself if I've aimed for that and not made it? And I really worked out that I would feel better about myself in the future if I just tried my hardest. No matter what the results were, that was something I could control. How I showed up with the attitude, what sort of example I set to my friends, family, and most importantly, children about tackling a situation like this. Because my wife had been absolutely incredible when she'd gone through cancer a few years before. And I just wanted to set a similar example. I didn't want to be the polar opposite example for, and I did kick myself up the tail occasionally going, you cannot give up here, no matter how awful it is, because your wife certainly never did. And that's not the example set. But mostly I looked at it as a positive situation, but occasionally also you just give yourself that kick up the tail of, righto, Mark, I get it. Made some sense to have a bit of a sook for a moment, but that's not going to help drive you forward. How are you going to actually, pick yourself up again? And what's this? Come back to the breathing comment we made. Breathing's a great example of how you slow yourself down in the moment and take control of something. And the other example I consistently used is, what is the smallest action I can do now? Right? What's the simplest thing they've told me to do? Is it wiggling my toes? Is it pushing myself a centimeter up the bed? Because I had to use both those strategies like consistently through that first week when it was just horrific. When I woke up after the operation and realized I couldn't even move, and pushing myself a centimeter up the bed was the hugest amount of effort and took minutes upon minutes just to get myself a centimeter up the bed. Well, that's an achievement. I've done that. I might be exhausted, I might be feeling miserable, but I've achieved that. And what's the smallest thing I can do? Well, if I can just find a way to sit up a bit more, I'll protect my lungs a bit more, I can breathe a bit better, I'll got more chance of a better overall recovery because I'm not, I'm going forward slightly rather than going sideways, or worse still backwards with some other ailment coming up like pneumonia, bedridden pneumonia. So how do I take control of the little things I can do? How do I just focus on, I don't know if I'm actually moving my toes at all, but how do I just focus on trying to flex those toes? And I would sit there every 20 to 30 minutes and just go through a sequence of just trying to move my toes in all sorts of different directions. And then it was devastating whenever the physios would turn up or the spinal specialists, and they'd put me through the range of tests for the Asia test again. And on my left foot in particular, I'd get a 0 or a 1 score. Now, it's actually a scale out of 5, which took me a few days to work out. But, on that scale, 0 means no movement at all, and 1 means a twitch of movement. And my left foot was consistently getting 0s and 1s through those first couple of weeks, and right foot was getting 1s and 2s. So it was pretty bleak, but I wasn't losing sight of the fact that, just by trying, only by trying to flex them had I any chance at all of driving myself forward. So whilst it was devastating when the results were coming back similar or worse to previous assessments, at least it was the attitude that I wanted to take, was to keep trying to flex them every 20 minutes, just keep trying to move them.
Wow. Now, Mark, while you're talking, I started, trying to wiggle my own toes just to see, if they're still working. And yeah, thank God they're still in their right place. But it's things that we take for granted. You know what I mean?
Well, let's just talk about that, Prosper. So if those listeners, and I know there'll be plenty walking and doing other things, but there's any listeners that are just sitting down at the moment, just with your whole feet on the floor, knees at sort of 90 degrees, try and lift up your toes off your feet. So on the right foot, I can lift them up almost as good as I could pre-injury. On the left foot, I can't move my big toe much off the ground at all, and the other toes a little bit off the ground. And then if you just try and flex your feet so that you're flexing your whole foot up in one big movement, what they call dorsiflexion. I literally can't move the feet off the ground when I'm sitting at 90 degrees. The right foot are maybe 1.5 centimeters off the ground, and the left foot, I can sort of roll the outside of the foot up, but not the inside. So, and only then, again, you have a situation like this and you start to realize that your feet are actually important. I know it's obvious when I say it like that, you'll start to think about it and you go, yeah, obviously they're under my legs, they help me in the walking gait and all these other things. But, they're the things that are the foundation of the pyramid of our body, if you like, from a weight perspective. Everything's going through the feet. And if they're not working, then every other movement and postural issue becomes harder. And yeah, for me, I'm extraordinarily lucky. That's the biggest issue. That's the biggest thing of all. I've had some progress out of putting a hell of a lot of effort in, getting some great support, etc. But yeah, I'll deal with little issues all the time, and you just got to reframe them. Like if I'm trying to get dressed standing up and I get the wobble, so I have to reach out and grab something or sit down, and it's just hard work. And I had that same mental reflex every time of I wish I could get dressed standing up like I used to, but you just go, well, still, how lucky am I with everything that's going on? And that's just the physical side of it. Of course, we talked about, this reinvention of Mark, the new life that came about. Like so many amazing things I never could have predicted have happened out of this unlucky moment. Lots and lots of lucky things, and meeting such incredible people as you, and so many people I get to meet, other authors, people I've met through speaking, everything. That just people that have dealt a really, really tough life, and they just find a way to keep batting up with an amazing positive attitude. And one of my ladies I met through Griffith University just flicks me an occasional amazing note saying, I just basically inspiring you. And her, she's in such a tougher journey than me, and her attitude is just always incredible. And the people I get, I've had the opportunity to meet, it's incredible.
Now, I mean, obviously, while you're talking, I'm just thinking, even driving, your feet, you need to be, on the gas and things of that nature. Are you still riding at all, or?
Yeah, so the OT puts you all through a test before you can go back in a car and other things like that. So it took me a while to be able to regain my manual license because my left foot's more impacted than my right. And cycling, I wanted to get back to. I fell off in March, and here in Queensland, Noosa has like a 120k ride in October that I loved. And I just thought, you know what, I'm going to find a way to get back to that. I know I can't do the 120k ride, but if I can find a way to do the 20, I'll be around my mates. So in August of that year, I started to do a little bit of work on the wind trainer. I just realized how my lack of leg strength these days just meant that I just had and it's sort of neurological issues as well. So my body just doesn't understand how to move my legs and feet in the same way as before. So all of that's really mentally taxing. So whenever I try and do something different, or even just starting each day, getting up from sleeping, my body has to sort of rediscover manually how to walk, how to do things, and I have to think through it. So yeah, I found it very, very physically and emotionally or mentally taxing to try and ride again. So I didn't ever make that goal, but I did cycle a little bit with my youngest child and my wife on bike paths occasionally, and I've enjoyed that because I think it feels overall less abnormal than walking. So even just to sit here, I've got to concentrate on my core muscles and using my sort of tummy muscles to hold myself up adequately, because my overall strength is not right in my body. But yeah, cycling sort of felt less abnormal, so it was nice. But my wife and my daughter in particular of my family are very adamant that I do not have a future in road cycling. So whilst I was really keen to get back amongst the guys, it was really important as part of that idea of bouncing back, I suppose. And maybe that start you gave is a perfect way of illustrating that. So for so long in the recovery, the idea of bouncing back to who I was drove me, and that was really effective for a while. But eventually our thoughts start to evolve. We start to realize we're not who we were before. We can't become who we were before. We've changed. Our ability to be that person's changed. And we have to start to work out what we are now. And that's where that idea of bouncing back stronger comes, that we're not bouncing. Doesn't mean we're like, resilience is, to me, it's a bit like tumbling, and we're tumbling in a direction, and we've just got to keep enough control of it that we're going forward to somewhere good. But we don't need to just, if you think about doing a tumble turn on the spot, for example, you don't need to land back on exactly the same spot. You probably never will, to make it a success. And actually landing forward or landing in a slightly different spot is completely natural. And then we just need to work out where next. And what are we enjoying? What impact can we have? Who are we now? who we're meant to be. Perhaps I, as my audiobook producer, tried to be gentle when she said to me, Mark, I think you just need to come to terms with this accident. As unfortunate and as painful as it was, has put you exactly where you're meant to be in this world. And perhaps that's true. In any respect, I've got not much choice. I'm not going, I'm here now. And, how do I ride with it and make the most of the situation I'm in? And quite fortunately, there's so many great people in this world, and so many, I guess, things you can do if you start to open your mind to possibility, to see where that takes you.
But something, Mark, to whom much is given, much is required. What was actually starting to happen maybe in the work front prior to the accident? Was it something that you can't wait to go back to right now?
I think you probably nailed it. So let's not get too universal about it, that the universal was pushing me in a direction I wasn't listening, so the universal just pushed a bit harder. But I think there's an inherent little bit of that in what you're saying, and perhaps there's some of that in my story. So, 25 years of corporate life, making money for the man, making money for the big company, and incredibly successful and proud of the teams that I was involved in and what we achieved in that. And then I definitely reached that sort of phase through my 40s of, but what now? What more? What am I actually leaving on this planet? Where's the legacy? And I started to want to move from mining into renewable energy in particular, because I wanted to do something to try and make sure that industry succeeded in a world where we need change to happen around our overall greenhouse gas emissions. And so there's already this idea of how do I change my career and evolve into a more legacy, or just something that felt like a better emotional fit overall. And anyway, it hadn't quite happened. I'd gone to consulting back to the big mining company and others. But life was sort of nice because I was sort of working 10 months a year rather than working so hard as I was before, so I could be a bit more flexible. That was quite enjoyable. Like the day that I actually fell off the push bike, I was supposed to be flying to Salt Lake City for a project, so I was doing exciting things and getting to, not quite picking call, but, some flexibility, more flexibility on what I did, who I did it for. And then suddenly, I guess the universe shook me up a bit more and said, no, you've actually, this legacy idea is in your head for a reason. There's something more you had to do. And perhaps that's true. Anyway, perhaps I'm just a really crap cyclist. Although all those funny little emotions that you struggle with through the journey. Like, I felt I was a really good cyclist. And I certainly had the cycling crew at different stages say, how well I descended and how well I cornered. And, I don't think anyone ever felt short of confidence cycling with me from a, capability perspective. I felt like I was really good. And so then, of course, you suddenly the bike's hit this thing and this sunken piece of road and it's lost control, but you can't help but thinking, could I have somehow handled that situation better? Like, was it something about my cycling knowledge or ability, or did I do something wrong in the corner? And so I had to really work hard in that first week, that first month, to let that go. Like, don't punish yourself for that, Mark. That's not helping you drive yourself forward. Let's go back to the things you can do. Let's go back to breathing. Let's go back to pushing yourself up the bed. Let's go back to sitting up. Let's go back to flexing the toes. They're the things that drive you forward, not this mental punishment of how do you fall. So it's really true in life, isn't it? Where do we focus our energy? And right now, my choice is to focus my energy on seeing the good in people, the good in life, and the impact we can all have. And shows like this are just incredible to help so many talented people that you have on this show extend the impact they're having to people. And of course, it'll be sowing seeds in the ideas of those that are just listening of what is the impact I'm going to have. And there'll be people after every one of your shows, I'm sure, that step on and go, yeah, that was the impact I wanted to have. Now I'm going to find the bravery. And bravery only needs to be the thing that helps you take that next action you need to take. It doesn't need to be anything too big and grand. It's not the thing we set it up as being the all-conquering hero of war. Of course, it's important in those situations. But
Mm,
for all of us on any given day, it just needs to be the thing that gets us to take the next action or make the next brave thought that we want to do, and just take that step forward. Because once we take that step forward through this difficult moment, we start to see more interesting moments that spark our curiosity, that help us find the courage to take on the next thing. Because when we're curious, then guess what? That feeling starts to have a stronger drive on us than the fear. The fear's still there, but the
mm.
curiosity helps us balance out the fear, and we start to take a step forward again. So, what are those smallest actions? What are those little, ideas, those little seeds that you might be listening to, you're thinking to now, or having ruminate, and just go, where are they going to take me?
Absolutely. No, Mark, you see, I viscerally believe, and thank you so much for bringing this to our attention, because I viscerally believe in life, we're here to live, to learn, and then to contribute. Okay. So in order for us to be able to live the best lives, we need to learn a few lessons and go through stuff so that we have a good story to tell. And with what you have experienced, what they always say, that maybe your life flashes in front of you when things like this happened. Well, looking at how you were thrown up in the sky and you then fell into a ditch, and now you are on a level. Okay, so if you really look at it in that metaphorical sphere, your life was all day, you were high ranking flying corporate person, and then you were drawn back a little bit with this accident, which you say you fell into a ditch, but that was just life showing you where you just needed to be in order for you to then stand and be the one that's speaking in front of the podium. Now, you, from all of this, you just started getting a fraction stronger, a fraction stronger, a fraction stronger. And now you can lift a bit of your feet, you can talk, and you're now writing and creating memories with your family. Could you just share what this fraction stronger mindset really means for anyone who's not going through a cycling accident, but just going through life, and how people can actually instill this in their own challenges?
Yeah, so to me, I came up with that idea of a fraction stronger because I had to drive myself forward just by the smallest gains, and the idea that the smallest gains do accumulate. They so if I was going to be alive for another 30 years, even the smallest improvement was going to be with me for 30 years. That was really, really valuable. So definitely this idea of just, the next fraction, how do we get that a little bit stronger? But also the idea that we're actually more, we're actually stronger than we realize. And if we start to think about the fact that we've had past achievements, we might have had something, you know, our larrikin mates do something really silly to us when we were 21, but we found a way to, get through it, and it ended up being fun. We can think of all those memories. They're the fabric of us that actually are our strength, that when we rely on them and go, okay, what experiences have I had before? How did I get through those? What did I learn? Or what can I imagine of other people and how they got through their situations? I don't know exactly what they did, but if I imagine people that that I've heard of, or I know, or I've heard their stories, and I imagine what they've taken, what little fractions of gold can I pick up from how they might attack the situation? So to me, it is that fractional idea. And I break it down to really three major things. So I use a metaphor in my book: lanterns, angels, and demons. So what are the things that light up hope for you? Now, hope can be the vision of where you might want to get to, the big goal, but it is also these little embers of who you are, what you've achieved in the past, the support around you, a bit of curiosity, all these embers of things that actually help you light up hope, because you need to be able to look to the lighthouse on the hill of where you want to go, the big beacon, but you also need just enough light to keep you taking that next little fractional step, that next movement. And that light from within you, I think, helps, of knowing who you are or what you want to stand for. What are the values that really matter to you? So this idea of hope, lanterns of hope. Then angels. So what are the things that will help drive you towards that help? Your own effort, belief, whether that's your belief or borrowed from others. the love of people, just people turning up at a hospital and providing an inspirational story, or just caring for you, or bringing in fresh fruit salad into hospital when everything else feels dire, and you just taste that fruit salad and go, wow, I feel more alive. I feel a little bit better. Whatever it might be, right? Just that love, that care, reaching out for help, embracing the help that's given to you. Like, people love to help people, and if they are trying to provide you help, you reach out and actually embrace that help. You feel better, they feel better, and you get better results. So lanterns of hope, angels that drive you towards that hope. And then, unfortunately, for most of us, there's some form of demon, some form of the doubt, the negative emotions that might, be like your anchor, that stop you having progress. And for me, guilt was big, despair for my situation was big, fear of, all of the different hurdles that I had to sort of navigate at different stages. It kept, popping up, like in that, waiting that ditch, the fear. Then hearing the first news, fear. Some of the X-rays I had to do standing up to see if the operation had worked. So, can I actually physically do this task? I don't think I can hold on with one hand and hold my body weight up with one arm, because I only had one good arm at that point and wasn't that good. And my legs aren't working. So how am I going to hold myself up for this X-ray? And then what are the results going to be? Is it going to tell me that the operation was not successful? I don't want to hear that news. So all that fear that you have to navigate. And how do you manage to find the ways to reframe these negative thoughts for positive action? So yes, that's okay. Like, I might be able to park the thought for now. I don't need to deal with it. But, can I attach a reframing thought to it? So, for example, when I walk with my family, I'll always fall behind. I don't like falling behind. I can only walk at half the speed I used to walk. But I can immediately think, well, I don't like falling behind, but at least I'm walking with the hope of improvement. So how do I just attach more positive thoughts that make me keep taking positive actions to my negative moments? Because I will have negative moments. So yeah, lanterns of hope to aim for, angels that drive you towards that hope, and then the demons that you've got to manage so that you don't end up getting distracted or delayed for too long, or just overwhelmed by, I guess, the difficulty of your situation. And the people that come in and support you are so important to that.
Mark, you see, I think what you bring to the table is a lot of perspective. All right. So many people have not really gone through anything major in their life. Maybe just the last couple of years in the pandemic, and they were told, you can't come to work. And that was like a big pattern break in their life. But you went through, a life-threatening injury, and you still went past it. Somebody would have been, in fetal position, woe is me, I just want to look after myself and everything else. But you're literally standing up and saying, I'm here, I want to show people what's possible. What's been the most rewarding moment in your speaking career so far? And obviously, how has it sort of really shaped the work that you're doing? Because you must be doing this knowing that it is making an impact for people.
Well, firstly, Prosper, I have to say that I did have moments in the fetal position as well, right? We all will. When you're going through something tough, there's definitely times I lay on my hospital bed and cried and thought, woe is me. The day I'd been making reasonable progress for 5 weeks, and but the spinal team were doing their regular inspection of me, and I just said, I'm going okay. Do you think I'll ever run again? And I didn't think they were going to say yes, but hearing them say no, was just completely deflating, even though it was the answer I expected, because I'd put so much effort in, and I really wanted to make a material change to my journey. So, we'll all have that, and we'll all have, yes, I had to go through something really challenging, and plenty of people do. We just don't often know their stories. I'm in a situation where I've chosen to start to share mine, but there'll be lots of stories out there that go untold. Lots of people going through challenges, and it's not a comparison thing anyway. It's whatever challenges you've been through at this point in time and how you dealt with them, they're all important to you. But back to the question, I mean, I think it's that times when somebody reaches out to you after hearing you on the radio or having heard you spoke and just, talk about the difficulty that they've been through, and that somehow you made a difference to their ability to have perspective on what they're going through. And I think that is true. I think I'm fortunate overall. I've managed to keep perspective, but I definitely needed help. My wife was, probably most important of all of that, but the physios, doctors, friends, so many contributors to that having perspective. And I think what's important for us is that we don't, as we sort of start to feel that we're going through something tough, we don't allow ourselves to get isolated, because that is the temptation. I know in my situation, I just felt so broken. I just felt like everything that made me proud about myself was gone. And now these are unfair thoughts, but they're the thoughts that I had at the start. And of course, when you start to think like that, then what you want to do is to hold on to whatever pride you've got left. And your mind starts saying, not asking for help is the way to hold on to that pride. You almost use pride as a shield of, I'm not going to accept help, or I don't want to have help because I feel this need to feel proud, and so much of what I was proud about before got taken away. But actually, that's a completely wrong strategy. At that point in time, it's the time more than ever you need to be able to reach out and accept the help around you, and by then letting go of those emotions like pride and starting to talk about the feelings you might be having, and what a discussion we're having today. We're recording on Mental Health Day. The ability to actually acknowledge your own emotions, even if you're not fully dealing with them, but to start to realize that they're there and acknowledge them and to let them come to the surface is the most important step. And I think that's a step within perspective, isn't it? To start to recognize what emotions you have, and then to find a way to put that little bit of distance between yourself and the emotion. This is something I'm feeling now. This isn't me, but this is the emotion I'm feeling now. How do I find a way to move on from that emotion in time?
Absolutely. I think there was a statement that they said, I used to cry that I did not have shoes up until I came across a man with no feet. And I think that's just a perspective that you're bringing to the table and things of that nature. And there I was crying that I just broken a nail and I was going to take the rest of the day off. But now hearing your story, my good man, it's something that's just really put a lot of things into into perspective. Now, I know the rawness that you bring to the table and your ability to tell stories is what really connects you deeply with your audiences, whether through your coaching and keynotes. Now, for somebody who's watching right now, and thank you so much for tuning in, what would be the best way that people can get a hold of you, or maybe just let alone share their story with you, or learn a little bit more about how you can actually help them along their journey?
Yeah, absolutely stoked to build the community and to hear people's stories and to have people learn more about mine. Go to markberridge.com.au. You can follow me on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, just Mark Berridge. Mark Berridge author on Instagram. They're probably the best three ways of following me.
Absolutely. I'll definitely make sure that those links are in the show notes, and we'll put them for people to get a hold of you there. Now, Mark, you're inviting people to connect with you, and let's just say, for instance, somebody joins in and that person just so happens to be Mark before the accident. Now, knowing what you know now about life and who you've become, what sort of words would you give that young man?
I think that's never overreact to the situation. I think, it's difficult. You'll have moments where you feel overwhelmed, but even if you don't achieve what you want to achieve at any point in time, you will grow, you will learn, you get different perspectives, you see new information. And just by willingness to take on whatever challenge that comes in front of us, no matter the results of that, we actually end up being stronger people with more capability of taking on the next challenge. It's the experiences. When the expression is when failure is actually giving you a set of experience to then start from next time. You're not starting from zero with a failure. And so, how do we, I guess that idea that just you're actually be willing to take on any situation, because you never know what's on the other side of that situation.
Fantastic. I mean, those are really wise words, because so many people just, what do they call it? Spit the dummy and just want their way in life without realizing, hey, it could actually turn to be something else. Now, Mark, when throughout this whole conversation, you introduced us to a character who I would love to bring into the show right now. Your wife. You
Yes.
you haven't mentioned her name.
Lucy. So
Lucy.
yeah, my wife was Lucy, and my main physio at hospital was Lucy. So perhaps that was all, meant something. So there's lots of mentions of Lucy in the book, and I think I did have to Google and double check was the wife Lucy named more than the physio Lucy. I think so. Anyway, we'll do a word search on the book. The book's called A Fraction Stronger, that tells the story of that first few months in particular of the journey. And yeah, no, Lucy's just incredible. So my English rose. So we met. We both lived in Hong Kong in the 90s, and we met at the end of our time there. And she was good enough to follow me to Australia, and we've had 3 amazing kids. And yeah, you come back to what the thing. We'll all have different things that are important to us in life. But I think for me, for the bulk of my life, it's been that how do I be a good parent? How do I have a great family? Set up and make something special for my 3 children. And I think that's driven me through so many things. And I guess that idea, and what Lucy herself had achieved through her own cancer journey, really did help me find that strength. But it didn't need to be that. For me, that was what it was. But for each of us will have that pillar that will be, that's that first bit of strength that we find. And once we find that first bit of strength and get a little bit of progress or a little bit of even attempt out of that first pillar of strength, then we'll start to find the next pillar of strength.
Absolutely. And one thing that I know for sure, Mark, is Lucy is watching right now. And thank you so much for all you have done. But I want you to take this moment to leave a message for Lucy and just let her know something you've probably never mentioned to her, just predicated on who she has become in your life, sir.
Oh, I think that's just that, knowing that you've got someone that no matter how tough any moment is, that's going to look after you, that's willing actually to challenge you in the tough moments. So when I was in hospital in the first week, and she did something to challenge me, that someone that's by your side but is also willing to call you up a little bit or just to prod you in the right direction, that's a pretty special thing. And I think that, I guess that friendship, but also that ability to to be a leader, as well as a friend alongside me, I really value.
Absolutely. Now, Mark, you've went on, become famous. You've written a book and you've won all these awards. You've become a whole fraction stronger. What's life been like after the book?
I think the biggest thing is just the people I've met. Like, I think just I met so many beautiful people, brave people sharing their stories, first time authors. As I went through the writing process, I just found it completely inspiring, the people I was suddenly on the similar journey to, and all those challenges and fears, and is this writing good enough, etc. That was amazing. And then yes, the book's won 16 awards, and I've had the chance to go to the States for a couple of those award ceremonies, and then the people that I meet there in those ceremonies is just I've just loved the more than anything. I think that the thing I've valued and really loved the most about, I guess, the writing side is that chance to meet people, and on the speaking side, it's just those occasional moments when somebody shares just how much you've had an impact. And I think for most of us, that humanity of connection is so central to who we are, what we need. Where we all originally came from a tribe background that's inherent in us. And I guess that sense of allowing ourselves to feel human, to be human, and really appreciate and be grateful for those human connections is a really precious thing. And more than anything, this accident has made that central to me.
Absolutely. Now, Mark, I'm going to say this with utmost love and respect. You know, just hearing your story, I mean, obviously, I've been across it for quite a while, but hearing it from you directly has been an honor. And with what you have said and what you have been elaborating here, it just came to me now that somehow what you went through is akin to like a rite of passage. In my culture, in my tribe, when somebody gets to the age of 13 or 16, for 13 for girls, 16 for guys, you're called in by the village elders and you're proverbially tapped on the shoulders. And then they say, it's your turn to lead now. Now, knowing who you've become and knowing what you have embraced throughout all of this and become a fraction stronger, would you say this for you has been that platform that now elevates you to become who you're really meant to be?
Yeah, I think I've got that naturally and flippant and fun edge. So, of course, I'll just say, the accident catapulted me back in contact with the creative side. We talked about the diary at the start of that trip. Yeah, I had this creative bent, but it was a very minor part of who I was. And, now I'm an accidental author. But yeah, absolutely. If I take the more serious edge, no doubt, this is, I would have been in this privileged position of being able to share my story and have an impact on people without, what was a really, really difficult moment. So if somebody did tap me and throw me, a real curveball, then I guess I don't know whether I'll ever be grateful for it in entirety, but it feels like that was what was, this is the work that I can do, and it's having an amazing impact. And I'm very grateful for the ability to get up and to make an impact from where I was.
Absolutely. Well, I can't thank you enough for the time that we've spent on the call today. And it obviously would be remiss of me to not ask, what's next? What are we getting stronger on?
I want to write more books. That's my absolute love, because I heard you launch books on this show, so I've got to get back to that. And anyway, so definitely want to write more books, because I found I really loved that process overall. And I want to build more the program Bouncing Back Stronger and get that launched so that I can actually help people when they're coming out of hospital in particular, and that really lonely, difficult time when you first you had your world shaken up, just to have that sense of belonging and a bit of structure and a community around them that might just be the difference between them, getting no recovery or a good recovery. Might be the difference between getting a good recovery and a great recovery. It might be the difference between them extending that good recovery for another few months longer, which actually vastly improves the quality of the life. So whatever minor difference it makes, it'll all still be a material, because little minor improvements accumulate. And yeah, so just how do I find a way to come up with programs and ideas that help people in a difficult situation get better results?
Absolutely. Now, Mark, do you realize you've actually committed the proverbial sin right now?
Yeah, well, actually, I wanted to write the books before mentioning on this show, but then I knew from previous shows that whenever people mention it, that you say, well, then you got to launch it on the show. So I made sure I served you up the whole package there of knowing that those two things would come together. But look, if you win 16 awards when you don't, you're really hoping that you're going to write a book, turn up at the hospitals, the 3 hospitals that were so important to me, and just share a couple of copies of the book and hope that somebody reads them. That's what your goal is initially, but it goes on to sell a few copies and to win some awards. Then I think you're probably putting your head in your sand about where your abilities lie, where your strengths lie, if you don't write more books. So I think I was probably on the hook anyway, Prosper.
Absolutely. So that means this is not the last we're seeing of you on the Online Prosperity Show, then.
Well, I'll let the audience decide, but I'm glad that you and I are both on the same page that I'd like to come back.
Absolutely. Well, I can't thank you enough for the time that we spent on the call today. Like your life story and your experience have so much value for a lot of people, especially when it comes to building a bit of perspective when people are going through life. And what I've just learned is no matter what it is you're going through, you need to pay attention to what's happening because one day you would have a good story to tell, not only on the Online Prosperity Show, but for the rest of your life. So thank you so much for having gone through what you're going through and becoming who you're becoming.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks, Prosper. Thanks, listeners.
Absolutely. What a powerful conversation. And if you've been inspired to become a fraction stronger yourself, just make sure you reach out to Mark through the links that I'm going to be putting in the show notes below. And don't forget to like and share this episode, especially if you have or know somebody who's going through stuff that Mark has just mentioned, and they might just need that little bit of an edge or a little bit of a push to really make themselves a fraction stronger. I think Mark is the guy to go to because definitely these are some game-changing insights, especially when you think you are down on your luck. There's always something that you could at least do, like just wiggle your toes, and you never know where that's gonna lead you to. So I will be putting in all the links to connect with Mark in the show notes so that you can actually get started on your journey to becoming a fraction stronger. See you next time. And remember, I want you to keep embracing those challenges that might be showing up in your life. You might just be the gateway to your next big breakthrough. Bye for now.